Thank you very much, gentlemen. SKT finally breaking the curse here, taking down what was their kryptonite in Flash Wolves. But before we get into any analysis of this match, let's go ahead and take a peek backstage where Cloud9 held their breath, tracking the outcome of this match.
Just to prove that they can, it's never happened before.
He got it! Oh my god, he stole the Baron! MMD is going to fall down, he'll lose.
To try and take something down, but SK Telecom always have a cross map ready.
Yeah, of course, having the Rylai's crystal set.
So much excitement.
Well, you can see how uneasy they were, right? I mean, and that to a degree, especially when that Baron steal came through. I know all of us held our breath for a moment.
Just watching the debate.
No, but NA does make it through by the skin of their teeth and by the good graces of SKT
Off the back of
here.
Korea.
That's exactly the case. And so let's talk about this very dominant SKT team that's moving forward now as a #1 seed.
I think we all want to hit the pick ban, because when you have a look at this composition one more time, you just think this is another pick ban that SKT played flawlessly, but I don't know how many other teams can get away with playing this style of League of Legends. It requires so much coordination and requires you to win mid and top lane to be able to set up your 1-3-1.
The key thing with Lissandra is the only playmaker on their team, so it's completely reliant on Faker being able to make plays around the map. And while he was orchestrating so many of them, the setup initially from the Olaf and the Nami roaming together and finding the warding to make those plays much safer was immaculate.
Yeah, it's just a mix together that you can only praise like almost every single player in this game from SKT, because you highlighted it's the support and jungle setting up the vision, and then it's Faker and Lissandra engaging the fights. I think Flash Wolves made a mistake in playing Victor against SKT, because I think the way they normally beat them and the way you should beat SKT, again, is by having a mid laner with more pushing power, more early game presence, because you need to stop Faker from going and impacting these side lanes. If he can go bot lane and give Bang 2 kills, SKT will always win.
But let's have a look at why they were actually getting the side lane kills. It was because somehow a Caitlyn was being shoved under the turret repetitively, and Alan Sordak got completely outclassed in that bottom lane, just 2v2. They were real shaky.
I do actually think the matchup is in favor of SKT, especially the first few levels with Ezreal in there. He's super, super strong when we look at the first 3-4 levels. And that gave them enough of an advantage to then push in the lane. And then one roam happens, and then you get the big advantage.
And to be fair, both Bang and Wolf played phenomenally. I mean, Wolf's Nami was hitting bubble left and right. And when you're hitting even double bubbles at times, that's a lot of free harass.
You know, well, the bubble is a two-way street. I mean, the NL was just having a super soaker week. He was just getting left, right, and center.
The bubbles.
He bought boots to try to dodge them and still couldn't dodge them.
The first by Zerker Greaves is very questionable, but you speak about plays around the bot lane. Let's go ahead and take a look at our first replay. 17.5 in, bot lane turret dive, 2 for 0 for SKT.
And I think this is the absolute strongest thing about SKT. If you don't put pressure on mid side, they can start setting up some plays like this. There's obviously a double TP coming down, and then it's on Faker to engage perfectly, and he does it every single time. 3-man snare into his own ulti, that's on 4 members.
Double bubble.
And then it's very easy to land the double bubble, but obviously credit to Wolf as well on that one. And this is how they just keep snowballing, and you can always rely on Faker to engage these fights perfectly. And that's why he can make Lissandra work, where almost no other mid laner at Worlds right now would be able to do that.
And we always talk about when the Flash Wolves is Kasa and Maple, and this time around it was actually Duke as well as Bang that was able to cut Maple off. He didn't get the rotation down into that bottom lane, and they just didn't have the damage to be able to follow up on the play. So, you know, heads up play out of Faker to kick it all off. But in a sense, you know, zoning away that Victor, the one champion that was relatively in the game, was probably what saved it.
But again, Victor can never roam, you know, in the first place, and that's the problem. If Maple is just sitting alone in mid, he might be strong enough, but the rest of his team will lose around him, and he's not able to help them, and he has to be able to help them for Flash Wolves.
But to be fair, I think that Flash Wolves really overplay their hand in both side lane plays from SKT. That bottom one, they got so overextended after not having a tier 1. The double TP is up. You know that you can get easily flanked. Same with the top defend that was just absolutely abysmal. And it's just a lack of respect for what SKT can do with a TP in the mid lane, which is not something that we see so often.
And it's also another opportunity where they just didn't cut their losses. One more time, you know, 2 people should die here. You should give up a turret. Instead, they keep spending TPs. They go back in. And credit to SKT, because they're good enough to punish you for this every time.
Love the bubble here and MMD in the back, and then he actually ends up having to flash over, and he's now on the wrong side. And he's not able to join the fight. Not only you shouldn't even have lost 2 members here, in my opinion. As soon as you have 0 control mid in your own jungle and they start roaming, you got to leave that tower. Don't even say and think maybe we can hold it, maybe they're back away, because they won't. If you play against a team who's so good at playing, you know, by the book, understanding, okay, now we can go dive top tower, that's our strong lane, you should always be able to respect and almost predict the play.
I mean, 40,000 damage out of Bang. He was having such an amazing game. The second SKT started executing the 1-3-1 with Bang in the mid lane, it was just disaster for Flashwolves. Nobody could actually deal with him and Nami hitting pretty much every Mystic shot. And when you go with that Trinity Force build, that 2-item spike is going to be just the strongest DPS you can have at that time for an AD.
And Crumbs, you pretty much just hit all the reasons that Bang is receiving player of the game. But of course, you know, part of what allowed him to do that was the play set up by Faker. And although Faker will not have had as impressive a scoreline, he definitely helped get Bang to that place where he can go 10-0-7 and do 44% of the team's damage. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's insane. But once again, just want to repeat that going into best of 5 now, teams need to start respecting the plays on the map. The flash headbutt pulves, the double TPs, cut your losses and just get the heck out of dodge, because too many times in this group stage, we've seen teams gamble, overreach, and get severely punished.
Yeah, it's kind of been the story of this tournament so far. I feel some teams are very good at being proactive and actually making these plays like SKT, and then too many teams are just way too slow at reading it. I can think to multiple European teams as well. Like, someone recalls on the map, like a support recalls, and they're like, all right, he will for sure go back to bottom lane. No, actually, supports keep going to mid, and then they can roam to the sides, and they start forcing plays. Support shows up, and they get surprised, and they die. And I talked to some of these players after. They're like, yeah, we didn't expect him. Maybe he didn't come. Maybe he did. You got to respect that, because it will happen.
And I personally attribute that to just the communication. That's something that when you're seeing somebody off the map, you have to call them Mias and pretty much call out all the possibilities of what can happen. If somebody's off the map, you have to call out they can go top, they can go middle, or they can TP down in this location. And as long as a team is able to look at each of those options and make sure that everybody understands the dangers around each one, these plays are going to be respected, and the punishment is not going to be nearly as severe.
And I want to save some of this quarterfinals discussion for a little bit after the group draw show, but now with the group stage completed, let's take a look at the teams advancing to Chicago. Our top 8 teams at Worlds 2016 are Albus, Nox, Luna, Rocks, Tigers, SK Telecom, T1, Cloud9, H2K, Edward Gaming, Samsung Galaxy, and Royal Never Give Up. So gentlemen, as we look at these 8 teams, now I want to start talking about, you know, who's our front runners? Who are we looking for having great matchups, or what are their roads to victory?
I'm going to say Albus Nox is the only team that does not have Koreans in them.
What is that? What do you mean by that?
Korean players.
Oh, does not have Korean players on the team. Okay, great.
When you have a look at it,
I'm looking out for them.
So when you have a look at the groups, I mean, we've just said it time and time again, Korea has still won 3 first seeds. That's absolutely insane. And the scary thing is now, I mean, SKT, they look crisp, but Samsung Galaxy, they won 2 games in 24 minutes. Rocks Tigers, they were the favorites coming in. Like, who the heck do you want to draw out of a pool 1 right now? Sure. H2K is the only one that looks like you could possibly fall as.
And then actually H2K looked insanely good when they got the 4-0, because they were so good in the early game, especially like if you can't match the laning phase against H2K, you will struggle against them. I think the cool thing is now looking at like all the groups and overall which was the strongest and weakest. There's a lot of talk, you know, some people say Group A was the weakest because like Albus made it out, but then CLG and G2 underperformed big time. I think a lot of people look at a Group B with C9 now making it, but Flashwolves and IMA had so many bad games as well. It's really hard to pick the one group, because that can actually tell a little bit more of like which second seed will be strongest, because all 4 second seeds have shown so many issues, so many weaknesses.
Inconsistencies, right? Because even as you talked about with H2K, if they play like they did on their week 2 day, then they look as good as probably any of the other first seeds on their good day. But on their poor day, who knows what could happen, right? I'd be happy to draw them probably as a 2 seed for my best opportunity as a victory and coming out of the quarterfinals.
Yeah, and the team that you're probably worried about the most as a 2 seed is probably RNG right now, because they just look like a complete wild card. They look like they have good lanes, and then they have bad lanes. They look like they can play macro. The next game, they look absolutely lost. Like, no one can pin down, like, what is actually going on with RNG right now, because, honestly, they're just so inconsistent.
Right, well, what about EDG, rather? Because as a 2 seed, again, I don't know how many allowances we give a team where we say, look, we know they're better than this. Look, we know they're better than this. Because the expectation was that they were going to be one of the strongest teams coming in.
So you've seen some bright signs from this team. One, when everyone else was watching games, Mouse was still playing solo queue. And you also know that they're actually giving him a lot of support from the coaching staff. The big question is, like, is it going to be enough? Because his history tells us, like, no, that is not enough. He's a bad player and he's going to be exploited.
All right, well, it looks like they're ready on stage. So let's send it down to Riv and Jat for the quarterfinal draw.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. And after an incredible 2 weeks of